the wounding themes of consciousness. So this is like the victim mentality, abuser mentality, but essentially wounding, be it victim or abuser. So every wounding that is being discussed, and I would mention each of these. So you have rejection to judgment to overwhelm to loss to distrust to inadequacy to violation to insecurity. So these are nine wounding themes of consciousness, right? So these are nine like really traumatic. For each of these wounding themes of consciousness, they provided a dissection to all of them. And you have trigger, you have the trauma, you have root program belief, you have emotions, you have the lessons learned. So yeah, these are just all encompassing. You have defense mechanism over compensating, and here's my copy. For each of the themes of consciousness, you have the trigger, the root program. So the trigger is just like a quick, okay, so for wound of rejection, the trigger is rejection. The root program is I am unlovable. Root program is just like the story that you're telling yourself, the narrative, the belief. I am unlovable for rejection. Then you have the trauma, which could range from different types of abuse to harassment, discrimination, things like that. You have primary emotion, which is just whatever emotion that comes up, right? You also have media choices. So the things that we consume reinforce these belief systems, and there's a list of them. So, what does it mean for someone who is in the theme of consciousness rejection? What kind of media choices would that kind of person have? So, you have like cancel culture because that's in line with that root belief of being unlovable, right? And so, for each wounding theme of consciousness, you have all of these different aspects. You also have the defense mechanisms. So, what mechanisms did you create to cope with these things? So, when the trigger comes, what happens after? What are you most likely to do? Right. And there is overcompensating as well as avoidant. That means there are two extremes. So, if said trigger should occur, it would remind you of a certain traumatic response that shows up in a certain way. And then you remember that, and the way that you learned to cope was okay. Say, for instance, like in my case, right? The way that I learned to cope with rejection, yeah, the way that I learned to cope with rejection was more avoidant, and that's isolation. Let me see. Yeah, defense mechanism, avoidance, isolation. Yep. So because when I would feel like, oh yeah, someone is rejecting me, or I feel rejected, right? I feel like, oh, I'm not being loved. Then I put up this wall to protect myself. I isolate. I'm not gonna come near you. Shay, you don't want me to come near you. I'm not gonna come near you, right? And that's what I used to do to cope with the fact that this other person had done something to me that I perceived was that, oh, I was unlovable. In reality, what the person did to me, it could be perceived in other ways. But I chose to perceive it from that way because I was so attached to that belief system. That was the belief system that gave rise to the thought, right? The trigger immediately tripped off this belief system, and it's just like an alarm that started beeping in my head, and I couldn't stop. And I'm like, oh my god, you want me to leave you, right? You want me to leave you, something like that. But it's like, no, no, I just needed my space, right? But because I had suffered from a very core memory of feeling rejected, then oh, anything that has a resemblance of that, I automatically just take it as, oh yeah, that's rejection. But essentially, for each of the themes of consciousnesses, the wounding themes, you get to see all of these different aspects and not just these details. You also get the physical manifestation. So for rejection, you could have like acne, anorexia, self hatred, because you know if everyone is rejecting you, you might as well reject yourself. For you to even accept that you've been rejected, it means that you've also rejected yourself. Like I said, as above, so below, as without, so within. The same way that you're showing up as is how you're showing up to yourself, because you can't pour from an empty cup, right? You meet other people where you've met yourself at. Thoughts: I'm unworthy of love. I'm not good enough. What it's teaching us. So not only does it really dive deep into all of the thoughts, the emotions, the actions that are then perpetuated as an effect, resultant effect of these triggers being tipped off, right? Not only does it list out all of these things and even the good, seemingly good things, right? Because sometimes you're overcompensating, right? In my experience and observation, people overcompensate sometimes, and that could be perceived as a good thing, being extra about things. And someone can sit there and be like, oh, they're so good at what they do, they pay attention to detail. I'm calling myself out. They pay attention to detail, but it's because you're trying to perfect every little detail so that you get more validation for it. And in that way, validation is perceived as love, is perceived as worthiness, right? And then not only does it focus on all of these things, it also focuses on the lessons. And I love that it sheds light on the lessons that are being learned. So it's like, what is it teaching us? Remember, I said pain can be transmitted to power. It just depends on how you decide to look at it. So, with this, what is it teaching us? Rejection of abuse endured, boundaries. It's teaching us boundaries. So, in a way, rejection reminds you that there should be boundaries, right? But healthy boundaries, not making it extreme. And then they give you the ways to heal, like affirmations to heal. So it's healing. I am innocent. I was projected onto or abused. So yeah, whoever feels rejected was rejected by somebody. So it was passed on to you, and then you started showing up with these defense mechanisms. And that's how you keep seeing the world. Give us a more tangible example of how these wounding themes of consciousness show up, how we're able to dissect them and see these different aspects. Also, how it's possible for there to be overlapping themes. There are ways that you show up, and it may not just be one thing, it might be an accumulation of different wounding. So there's a lot to dissect. Truly, I would give a real life example for that one. So, the timing and the point in which I was born, based off of the timeline of my family, was very interesting. And so, I had abandonment issues growing up, right? There were times where I just felt I was by myself and I had to take care of myself. My parents had their own stuff going on. They were trying to figure out their own life at the time. And to the best of their capacity, they were doing their best genuinely. And I understood that. But it didn't change the reality that played out for me. Growing up, I had abandonment issues, and that pointed towards rejection. Now, because what I had seen around me in terms of how family dynamics and parents were there for their children, it didn't feel the same for me. So I felt like I was unlovable. I felt like I was rejected. Like, oh, there must have been something wrong with me for me not to receive the treatment that I was seeing around me. And in a way, my worth was tied towards the thing that I did not get. And so that caused me to feel a sense of loss, like, oh, this is something that I do not have. And that in turn allowed inadequacy to seep in. So that feeling like there's something that I need because there's something that I do not have, which was the love, which was that care, and just that also sense of worth that comes with it. Because I needed something to fill that space, that gap. I needed something maybe external that would help me get that worth. What that was for me was good grades. And I would get really good grades. And my parents would give me so much attention and love. And, like, everyone makes me feel like such a superstar. And it felt so good. It felt good. It felt like that could equate to the love. And so essentially, I got attached to that persona. And because I was all about trying to get the good grades, my peers became my competitors because, like, I'm trying to get those grades so that you do not, right? And something had to give. So I found myself, because I had conditional love based on performance, having to perform and pay attention to detail and show up in certain ways. And that caused me to be like, have this perfectionist perspective of things. Like, I cannot just do things, I have to be very particular about it, right? And that wasn't serving me. That wasn't serving me. That also affected my trust, self trust. So that's also distrust seeping in. What about when things don't go as planned? What about when, I read for an exam and the question I read for didn't come out? Or, after trying so hard to create all of the scenarios that could exist, right? But then these things happen and I can't control them because life, you can't control life. Life just moves. And distrust, that is fear, is triggered by the unknown. So literally, because I had been rejected, then that caused me to have a perceived loss. Then that caused me to feel inadequate. Then that also rippled into insecurity and competitiveness, and that also rippled into distrust. You see that all of these different wounded themes of consciousness are able to overlap and interplay even in this chain of experiences, right? And the same thing, one theme of consciousness could also show up in multiple ways. And yet again and again. And there are certain wounding that, even though you have, gone through the process of reading the book and coming to terms with unconditional love, freedom, happiness, they still show up in areas of your life that you are yet to encounter or experience, right? And this was also me with, again, the perfectionist, paying attention to detail mindset. So, and this happened during my YouTube journey. I posted my first episode, and before that, I had to edit and I had to get this done and that done. And I felt like I was paying attention to too much detail, that it was consuming for me. And I had to take a step back to observe my patterns, to observe the earliest memory of what took me to that place, to ask myself, what am I resisting? All these big questions. And yet again, we are ever evolving, we are changing, and there is a need to keep doing the inner work. It is practice, it is a lifestyle, because we're trying to live our best lives. We have to be aware of how this shows up and, have these tools that this book provides. We resist ourselves because They resisted and rejected us. Shame from environment. We resist ourselves, our truth, and join them. Now we project our happiness outside of ourselves. Now we judge ourselves because we do not accept ourselves. So we judge others. We do not accept ourselves. So we do not trust ourselves. We fear the unknown because we do not trust ourselves. We do not trust ourselves, so we project our happiness outside of ourselves. We project our happiness outside of ourselves, so we have expectations of others. We have expectations of others, so we resist what is ourselves. We have expectations of others, so we fear the unknown. We have expectations of others, so we judge others. We judge others, so we judge ourselves. The end. With that being said, I had such an amazing time discussing all of these different themes of consciousness with you in a way that provides resources for us to start to disintegrate, dissect the shadow self, because the shadow self is you. It's just a side of you that you're yet to see, that you're yet to shine light on. You know, you can think about it like a child that just wants to be seen. So, yeah, it is a child because most of this wounding came from childhood. So, in a way, it is a child that just wants to be seen. See them, have compassion for them because they were never ours to begin with, and do the inner work every opportunity that we get. It it's not easy, just like everything else, but with time, with practice, with consistency, and knowing that you're always doing the best that you can at every given moment. And genuinely, if you choose to walk this path, that you're always your best self yet. And everything is always in the becoming, all is in the becoming. So it's just now. You just have to trust in that. You just have to tap into that and make the bigger choices. Again, you have the heart desires and you have the conviction to make those heart desires a reality. You just need to start listening to yourself and you need to start seeing yourself. And then you accept yourself and you hold so much love, understanding, acceptance for yourself and for everyone around you. And then you rule your world. I wish you all the best in your journey. And like I said, you would get all the details in the description about the book. And yeah, I highly recommend you go on this journey for your own self. Till next time, live your best life. Live your best.